Good morning, everyone. I'm Robbie McCord, in case you don't know me. um, so this is the second in the creation care series, I guess, is what it's a little series that we're having right now. Um, the focus on today, I'm going to just keep admitting people as they come in. The focus today is what specifically
I can admit them, Robbie.
Did you get them? Did you get them?
I'll add them.
Okay, thanks. What we can do in our daily lives to improve ecology, but the help with climate change in particular. And before I get going with the bulk of this, oops. Okay, doesn't matter. I'll just transition into the bulk of the content. Let me pull up our PowerPoint here. So I'm going to read from this PowerPoint, but if at any point people have questions or things they'd like to comment on, go ahead and just jump right in. Let's see. Sharing. Geez, I use this every day at work, and now I'm forgetting where is the share screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, can everyone see the adult formation? Okay, great. Okay, so as I said, the focus is going to be what we can do to personally in our own lives. So just wanted to start. These were just screen grabs that I took from one day. This was September 1st, but you could do this any day. And it was just, if you just look for climate change, there's news, and news, and a lot of it is really kind of depressing. So we talk about power companies hindering green energy, the degradation of the polar ice caps, talk about our own government not doing much to help with this pressing issue. And I could definitely say it can get really depressing. I was listening to NPR Invisibilia episode a few months ago. I don't know if people listen to the program, but they do some really good stuff. And they were talking about this exact same thing where, it really gets to you. And the host was just talking about, what can we do? And she doesn't come up with any groundbreaking ideas, but kind of how she leaves the episode is just this idea of doing the next right thing. So maybe we can't affect, the idea of doing some kind of massive global solution can be overwhelming, but in our own daily lives, we can tell ourselves to do the next best thing, whether that's helping somebody, whether that's helping out with the environment, anything. But as we go about our daily lives, whenever we're encountered with choices, just do the next best thing, do the next right thing. And that kind of segued a little bit into what I was thinking for the presentation today. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is drawing from the book Drawdown, which Deacon Craig directed me to. And I thought the editor had a really good piece here. He said, heal the split. Heal the split between what you think and what you do. So again, if we can if we believe that climate change is a moral issue and something that we need to address, the more and more we say we agree we need to do something about it, but we don't do anything about it, it creates this divide within ourselves. So the more and more we say, yes, I think this is important, and actually do something about it, at least it's something that we can reconcile with ourselves. So I guess a lot of the theme of what I'm talking about is more individually, what can we be doing? So doing the next right thing, healing the split between what you think and what you do. And then, of course, it's just from this here is more theological, but like pray thoughtfully. So obviously prayer is our attempt to communicate with God or try to gain more insight in that regard. Also, I was looking a little bit at Templeton Foundation, and they do a lot of work with the intersection of religion and culture and science. And one of the studies they did was just looking at what prayer does to us. And I think a lot of people acknowledge that there's a lot of benefits to praying, but in the study they were looking at, they were talking about how when we pray, we feel more of a connection to the thing we're praying for. So, it could be a person, it could be an issue, but it kind of solidifies that within ourselves. Also, it just makes us feel more calm and more grounded. So, it gets us in a better frame of mind, I think. So praying thoughtfully, I think, is very important. When I look at a lot of the eco-justice, the concept of the cosmic Christ comes up a lot. And I'm not sure how aware people are of this, but it's kind of this it's a theological idea, like Christ being concerned with the cosmos. And a lot of it is grounded in this idea that, well, you look at the Gospel of John and the preface to it, and it's this idea of Christ being kind of with creation at the very beginning. So these are just verses that are that might come up regularly for the cosmic Christ, and I was going to read one of them really quick. So Colossians 1:15 says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross." So creation care, we talk a lot about treating creation as if it's sacred, and this idea of Christ being with creation at the very beginning. I mean, what could be more sacred than that? So taking that more seriously in that regard. And then, as I mentioned, virtually everything I'm going to talk about today is from this book, Drawdown. I would very much recommend it. Yeah, if you want to talk to me about it more afterwards, that's great. But thank you, Craig, for directing me to this. I mean, there is a ton of great information in here, and it's pretty easy reading, and it's almost like a coffee table book. I mean, you could just have this on your coffee table, leaf through it. It's really great. So I would totally recommend you checking out this book afterwards. So a lot of what I will refer to is tons and gigatons of CO2 in this presentation. So just to give you an idea of what 1 ton of CO2 would look like, it's right here. So enough CO2 filling this balloon here is 1 ton of CO2. So the average American car emits 7 tons of CO2 a year. So 7 of these balls, and the average American household emits 24 tons of CO2 a year. And I put a note down here, a gigaton is 1 billion of these. So just keep that in mind as we go through this, because I'll refer to gigatons a lot. Okay. So how I'm structuring this is I'm going to look at 10 solutions that you can implement in your daily life. And as I said, most of this is being drawn from the Drawdown book. So if you want more information, I would refer you to that. So the first solution, and these are in no particular order, is LED lighting. And on each one, I'm just going to give some information. So LED lighting, I have this little timeline here. LEDs were, and I am not a scientist, so I'm not going to get too far into that. LEDs, or light emitting diodes, were discovered or invented in 1874. In 1907, I believe it was more discovered on how they emitted light. In the 1960s, Texas Instrument, GE, Hewlett Packard, some of the technology companies started doing a lot of work in kind of creating or more solidifying light solutions with LEDs. In 1994, the first LED light bulb was invented by a team of Japanese scientists. And then in 2014, that group was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for that discovery. LEDs are one type of light bulb. Incandescent and fluorescent are two others that you're probably much more familiar with. Incandescent have been called a heater that, as a byproduct, emits light, so it's extremely ineffective. Those are the ones that heat a filament, and then that filament emits light. And then fluorescent, I believe it's a gas that's absorbed by a phosphor that emits light. That's all the science I'm doing there. So what you need to know is that LEDs are very efficient. LEDs transfer 80% of their energy use into creating light rather than heat, and that is way better than those other two solutions there, incandescent and fluorescent. 7.8 gigatons of CO2 could be avoided by 2050 if we adopted LEDs. LEDs are becoming the standard in-home lighting source. And just a pretty neat note, LEDs last 27 years if used 5 hours a day. And you can find LEDs at the store now. This is not some obscure technology. We are in our house trying to get more LEDs all over the place. So yeah, Craig.
So when you come back to the church, when you have a chance to do that, since you left, all of the lighting at the church has been converted to LED.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Throughout the parish house and the nave and everywhere.
That's great. The next technology is smart thermostats. So residential thermostats, there's some statistics I'm going to give you that when I read it, I was blown away. So I won't emphasize that too much, but man, I thought this was interesting. Residential thermostats alone control 9% of US energy consumption. Thermostats they're one of those technologies that have been around for a long time, yet with very little innovation. Thermostats have existed for almost 2 centuries. Manual thermostats are left to the capriciousness of humans. So, I mean, it's no surprise how this gets out of how this contributes to energy use. I mean, I'm guilty of this. We just forget to reset our thermostat. The Nest thermostat, smart thermostat, came to market in 2011. And so the book actually has a lot of interesting information on how the Nest thermostat works, but it gathers data about your energy use in your home. It senses occupancy within the house. It makes recommendation about use, and it basically adjusts the thermostat to where it needs to be. And then a lot of times the human has to override the thermostat and say, no, I don't want it here. I want it somewhere else. So it kind of takes control of that technology in your house. In a study that Nest Labs did, so the Nest thermostat company, they found that over a 2-year period, smart thermostats had energy savings of 12% on heating and 15% on air conditioning. That's a lot. So almost every one of these solutions, I'll have this kind of summary down here on the bottom of how much gigatons can be saved. So assuming smart thermostats continue to gain in popularity as projected, 2.6 gigatons, so those are in the billions of CO2 could be avoided, not to mention obviously significant cost savings. And you can find these at stores everywhere. The next solution, biking. So what I was going to mention is that bikes have been around for quite a while, and in the 1800s, it was the preferred mode of transportation, and you can see cities were designed with that in mind at the time. However, in the 1900s, with the advent of the automobile, cities spread out a little bit more just because cars can go much further. So cities have become much less bike friendly as a result. And we see this a lot, of course, in the United States, where the automobile is king. So one of the reasons why biking is much lower here than in Europe is that alone. And the book talks quite a bit about the proper infrastructure to make biking appealing. So I guess if this presentation, this slide, I guess, is a little bit more geared towards urban planners than us individually, but I think this is an important thing to keep in mind. So in terms of infrastructure, biking is more appealing if the ground, of course, is level, direct, and it has interconnected biking paths with roads and lanes. So not surprisingly, if we feel safer when we're biking, we're much more inclined to bike. Thoughtfully designed junctions where cars and bikes meet is important. Secure parking for our bikes, proper lighting. So again, if we have these things, we're much more inclined to bike. If we don't, I mean, I probably am not going to bike. And then equity. We see a lot in cities all over that in higher income areas, there are bike paths. In lower income areas, there aren't. There needs to be more equity in terms of where the proper biking infrastructure is. And just some interesting stats. I'm sure you guys aren't surprised by this. Denmark, 18% of local trips are taken by bike. Netherlands, 27%. The United States, 1%. So I'm not saying I'm better than everyone because I have a bike that just sits in the garage. But this is something that Americans need to be doing a little bit more of. And I think our cities, I think that's on the next slide, our cities are taking this into account. They are making efforts to make biking more appealing. There's a picture of Rotterdam and Copenhagen. I don't know, I guess that's secure parking there in Copenhagen. They certainly feel inclined to bike, so not surprisingly, those Northern European countries lead the way on this one. But in New York City and Portland, I think is called the most bike-friendly city in the United States. Biking is pretty high. So, so a note here, if the use of bikes for urban trips were to increase 2% globally by 2050, 2.3 gigatons of CO2 emissions could be avoided. And it is heading in that direction. It's not heading in that direction nearly fast enough, though. So this is another one that I think would be more geared toward urban planners than us ourselves, but walking is another important one. I included this aerial shot of Venice in Italy to once again drive home the idea that the older cities were more geared towards, of course, I mean, Venice is very old, geared towards walking as the preferred mode of transportation. You would not see a city designed like that today with an automobile, or pretty much any city would not be designed that way. But cities today that are being developed take more consideration of the automobile than the walker. So Um, Similar with bikes, criteria for walkability. Walking has to be useful. So it has to be, if I'm going to walk, it needs to be to accomplish something. So maybe that means condensing cities a bit more to make your walk include more things and get you out rather than, if I'm going down the block, I'm not going to take a car to do that. Walking has to be safe. We have to feel safe when we're out walking to feel inclined to walk, and that can mean safe from automobiles, safe from other threats. I have to feel comfortable when I'm walking, and I thought this one was interesting. It has to be interesting. So if there's sights for me on my walk, I'm more inclined to walk, and that can mean parks, it can mean trees, it can mean coffee shops. If there's more things along the way that I find interesting, I'll be more inclined to walk. Again, this is more urban planning, but something to keep in mind. Maybe you can take this with you after this presentation and think, what are my favorite walking paths and why is that? And maybe these 4 criteria factor pretty highly into that. As cities become more walkable, 5% of trips currently made by car could be made by foot in 2050. 2050 is kind of used as the standard in the book. It's, shooting outward 30 years. This would result in 2.9 gigatons of CO2 being avoided. These are not insubstantial numbers at all. There's a lot of CO2 being avoided. The next solution I'll talk about is telepresence. Telepresence in the 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that was the stuff of science fiction. Today, it's very much a reality, and with the pandemic, it's even more a reality. I mean, terms like FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, these are our everyday vocabulary now. I never used Zoom before COVID, and now I use it every day. So telepresence, the biggest challenge to developing telepresence is achieving the sense of being there. A lot of the work I've done for my job is in educational studies, and this is something we talk about a lot. There's no replacement. You can have the greatest educational environment, and online learning is taking over a little bit, but there's no replacement for you can have a great online learning system, but there's no replacement for having the teacher actually being there with you. It's called teacher presence in educational studies. And we see the same thing with business meetings. You can have great technology, but the biggest problem is just feeling like you're there with the person who's talking to you. So that is something that inevitably is a challenge, but these technologies are becoming better and better, and they're trying to address that presence issue. This is a no-brainer how this benefits climate change. In a world of global business footprints and international collaboration, if people can work together without being in the same place, they can dodge a host of travel-related carbon emissions. Planes for air travel is one of the biggest carbon emitters there is. So being able to reduce that is a huge benefit to climate change. If 140 million business-related trips were avoided thanks to telepresence by 2050, 2 gigatons of CO2 could be avoided. And I thought this was a good point for a little interlude. This was a map that I found recently, and this is talking about nitrogen dioxide emissions. This is comparing 2019 from March to April to 2020 from March to April. And the purple areas that's nitrogen dioxide emissions. So not surprisingly, if you look at 2019, those areas are much darker. So there was much more nitrogen dioxide being emitted. You look at 2020 and those areas it's a way lighter purple map. And that means nitrogen dioxide levels are way down as a result of us not flying or driving probably mostly in relation to business. So there's a very stark example how in 1 year that changes quite significantly as our lives get disrupted. So I thought that was really interesting. It visually illustrates what's being discussed. The next solution I'll talk about is household recycling. So before the 20th century, there really was no need for the term recycling. However, as waste production multiplied tenfold over the past century, and experts expect it to double again by 2025. And that's a result of income, our income's going up, buying more, consuming more, and then throwing out way more. Recycling is very beneficial. So producing new products from recovered materials saves energy, and pollutants are minimized as there's a reduction in source extraction. So we save a lot of energy because we're reusing the material. We're not creating it from scratch. So recycling rates vary widely in cities around the world, 30% to 70%. And this isn't really dictated by wealth of city. I was looking, and I think Delhi, India, and Rotterdam have both recycle about 30%. So there's those are very different economic cities, but they recycle at a relatively low rate. Compare that to like San Francisco, which does recycle about 70%, but they're on par with cities in Mali. So we have this wide range of cities that recycle, and as I said, it's not really dictated by the wealth of those countries. So I thought that was interesting, something to keep in mind. There's a number of programs that exist to encourage people to recycle. Thought this one was pretty neat. Pay as you throw is what it's called. I think this is implemented in San Francisco, but basically your waste pickup, you pay for the amount of waste you're throwing out. So if your waste is more, you have to pay more. So it encourages people, rather than throwing the recycling in the waste, recycle it. Therefore, your waste is much lighter and you don't have to pay as much. So you pay as you throw. The more you throw out in waste, the more you will pay. The note here, 50% of recycled materials come from households. If this number were increased to 65%, 2.8 gigatons of CO2 could be avoided by 2050. The next solution is water saving. Hot water is responsible for 1/4 of residential energy use worldwide. So that is a lot. This is American homes here, and this is our water usage in American homes. So I think it's about 60% is used indoor, 20, well, that doesn't come off right. Yeah, 30% is outdoor, so like watering plants, using our water outside. And then 10% is actually from leaks. So just to give you an idea of how, in general, Americans use their water. Some technologies that are very helpful in regards to water saving: low flush toilets and water efficient washing machines are crucial in regards to water saving. These can each reduce water usage by 20%.
Robbie, could you go back and what I couldn't see how much water is used for outdoors and versus indoors.
Yeah, this is not, I could have created a better table. This is not a very good table, but for outdoor, for indoor, it's this, this is the area for indoor, this darker green. So that's about 60%. And then for outdoor, it's this green, that's about 30%.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Robbie, the other thing about water that we think, well, water doesn't emit, but the amount of pumping energy for supplying the water and the pumping energy for wastewater treatment is why it's important to conserve water from the emission standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. EPA stated that if one American home out of every 100 switched an older toilet out for a new efficient one, the country would save enough electricity to power 43,000 households for a month. So that's a pretty staggering number. Visual tips in regards to water saving. So some things we should strive for: reduce average shower time to 5 minutes. That is one that I do, and it's very easy because I don't have any hair, but it might be more difficult for other people. Wash only full loads of laundry, so consolidate your clothes as you're washing them. Flush 3 times a day per household less. So I think that's flush 3 times less per household per day, yes. Use rainwater for outdoor irrigation.
Robbie, your voice is breaking up a little
sorry.
bit. I don't know if something changed on your end.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. There's just some vibration with it. I wonder.
I do. Is it any different?
No.
Anything sitting on your microphone or anything like that?
Oh, I can go grab a headset real quick.
Let's try that because it's getting kind of garbled.
Okay, just 1 second.
Welcome home, Stacy.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Looks like you had a good time.
I did. Yeah, saw some amazing things.
Okay. Oh, good.
Yeah, much
Oh,
better.
great. Okay. All right. Moving on. I think we're running short on time, so I want to make sure I get this in. Let's see. So 95% adoption of low flow taps and shower heads by 2050 could reduce CO2 emissions by 4.6 gigatons. Food. Okay. This is a big one. Food waste. So food, obviously, it's a miracle. It's awesome what we can do with horticulture, agriculture, chemistry. However, 1/3 of food prepared or raised doesn't even make it to the dinner table. I think we're all aware of a lot of the issues with food actually getting to the dinner table. And this is something that really gets us upset, of course, with world hunger at being very high, 800 million people worldwide. However, food waste sitting around does a tremendous number on the atmosphere. It contributes 4.4 gigatons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year. And that's just from it sitting there rotting and emitting methane. I think methane. One thing that I thought was extremely interesting is that if food waste were a country, it would be number 3 in emissions behind the United States and China. So that, you know, I don't have to say it, it's contributing a lot to climate change. Reasons for food waste around the world, we're all guilty of it, but we're guilty of it for different reasons. Low income countries deal with issues regarding poor infrastructure, bad roads, improper facilities, bad refrigeration, whereas high income countries, we have this issue because of rejecting bad looking produce. We order too much, we forget about it in our refrigerator. So it's in low income countries, it's more on the front end. In high income countries, it's more on the back end. So solutions, improve infrastructures for low income countries. And then in higher income countries, preempt food waste before it happens. Find ways to reallocate unwanted food, standardize the sell-by date. Sell-by date is not when it's gone bad, it's basically when it looks better or when it tastes better, but you can still normally eat food after the sell-by date. And then education around ugly food. If it doesn't look that great at Kroger, it doesn't mean it's bad. You can still buy it and eat it. It's probably fine. We need to encourage the retailers not to just throw that out. So if 50% of food waste were reduced by 2050, we would avoid 26.2 gigatons of CO2. That's staggering. Plant-rich diet, another really big one. Shifting to a diet rich in plants is a demand-side solution to global warming that runs counter to the meat-centric, highly processed, often excessive Western diet broadly on the rise today. Raising livestock accounts for 15 to 50% of global greenhouse gases. So I think these are just a range of studies that were conducted. 15% was the low end of some of the studies, and 50% was the high end. On average, we get 35% more animal protein than we need each day, which can contribute to serious health conditions. I think the amount of protein you need in your daily diet is around 10 to 15%. And contrary to what a lot of people believe, you can actually get all of that from plants. You don't need meat to achieve that level. An Oxford study showed that switching to a vegan diet would cut emissions 70%, and a vegetarian diet would cut it 63%. So if 50% of the world restricted themselves to a healthy 2,500 calorie per day diet, with most of that coming from plants, 26.7 gigatons of CO2 could be avoided. And this isn't even saying don't eat meat. This is just saying mostly eat vegetables. So this is a little more generous, I'd say, than some of the prescriptions that I've seen. And then I believe this is the last solution I have, composting. Nearly half of the world's solid waste is biodegradable, yet much of this just goes to landfills, where it decays, producing greenhouse gases, so in this case, methane. Composting reduces emissions and lets microbes get to work, creating, and then a byproduct of this is we get very nutrient-rich soil. So composting is extremely useful. I mean, if you're planting, there's not really much better than compost. Composting, when done properly, can avert methane altogether. And composting is very simple, and it's something that we've been doing the last year, and I've been amazed by how simple it is and why I wasn't doing it earlier. But you can compost with an airtight container, just a bucket. There's more fancy ones that you can get at Lowe's or wherever. And then there's large scale composting. So there's a range of composting, but if you're encouraged to do this, you can really just do it with a bucket. So if all countries increase their composting rate by, on average, 15 to 20%, 2.3 gigatons of CO2 could be avoided. Here's some resources that I had, and you can reach out to me. I'll also make this available. So, but some community supported agriculture can go a long way in reducing food waste. There's some popular ones here in Columbus, Yellowbird, and Freshtown Farms. We use Freshtown Farm, and I think it's great. AEP energy efficiency kits. You can go to their website for that. There's various composting resources, smart thermostats. Like I said, they're pretty easy to come by these days. So,
Hey, Robbie, if
Yeah.
with the smart thermostats, if you go to Columbia Gas and you're a gas customer, you'll get at least $75 off the price of the thermostat.
great. That's a really good tip. So this was just because I like rankings. I compiled this last slide as a kind of top 10. So this is a summary. Telepresence comes in at number 63 on a, as far as the 100 solutions, telepresence is the 63rd most effective one. Composting is number 60. Biking and bike infrastructure is 59. Smart thermostats 57. Recycling is 55. Walking 54. Water saving is 46. LED lighting is 44. Plant-rich diet jumps all the way up to number 4. So that's huge. And then number 1 is reduce food waste, or number 3 is reduce food waste. And if I were on this call and listening in to somebody else, I would be asking, well, what are the top 10? So here we go. So this is not individual, or some of these are individual, but a lot of these are commercial here. So, or large scale. So rooftop solar is the number 10 solution, implementing rooftop solar. Silvopasture, which was a new term to me as a matter of fact, but it's kind of the putting forests and grazing areas and animals all together in a way that's mutually beneficial for them all. So silvopasture is number 9. Solar farms is number 8. Family planning, so this gets into overpopulation, is number 7. And then coupling that with education of girls is at number 6. So providing women with more education, more opportunities. This also addresses the overpopulation issue. Protecting the tropical rainforest comes in at 5. We know about plant-rich diets, plant-based diets, they're number 4. Reduce food waste. Wind turbines is number 2. And then the number 1 solution is improved refrigeration. So refrigerants in the form, their emissions in the forms of hydrofluorocarbons destroy, or they're awful for the atmosphere and they absorb heat. So improving the refrigeration would be the number 1 thing we could do worldwide, would make a massive impact in fighting against climate change. Okay, sorry, I had to rush a little bit there to get everything, but that is everything I have.
So thank you very much, Robbie. I would say reach out to Robbie if you have questions, or if you have technical questions. This is my day job on the energy efficiency thing. But we're gonna go ahead and sign off since church is gonna start on Facebook in about 10 minutes. So thank you so much, and we'll see you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Interesting.
Next week.
Thank
We'll
you,
talk about
Robbie.
plants.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Robbie.
Robbie. Thanks, Robbie.
And I'll make this available. So, all right. Bye-bye.
Right.